Hi, and welcome to this family workshop brought to you by the Great Exhibition Road Festival. Please can you make sure that you all have the following materials for today's session. Some A4 paper, a pen or pencil, at least 2 see-through plastic milk bottles, could be 1 pint, 2 pint or 1 litre, the more the better. Some scissors and some strips of fabric cut into from used clothes could be and cut into 0.5 centimetre thick, at least 20 centimetre long, or string, or you could even use strips of paper as well. So my name's Gayle and I'm an artist, and I'm so happy to be here with you today. We're going to have lots of fun. We're going to have the chance to think about and make some creative objects out of something that's in every house that you normally just throw away. Waste. We are going to be weaving waste today. So first though, I'd love to hear who you all are. In the live chat, if you want to, please can you tell us your names and who the children and adults are so we know who's there. And if you want to join us in the live chat, an adult needs to sign in using a Gmail address. So we've also got an online gallery called a Padlet, where you can show us photos of your artwork, which I would love to see. So the link is also in the chat. So I'm so excited to be able to do creative activities with you. You're in lots of different places, and I'm here in my studio just beside the Olympic Park in East London. But we're all here together for 1 hour to make exciting things. So today we're going to explore different ways that materials can be woven together, both in science and art. And at the end of the session, you'll have an object made from waste that will be beautiful and also help the environment. We're going to use waste plastic milk bottles to make a beautiful plant pot that you can fill with earth and grow a plant, perhaps from leftover fruit or vegetables, maybe a carrot top, an avocado stone, celery top, anything. And I'm joined today by 2 exciting and talented people, materials scientist Elena Diekmann and Yona Lesger, curator in fashion from the V&A Museum. Yona and Elena, say hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, hello.
So they're going to be telling and showing you their amazing work and research on waste to get you thinking about how we can all use waste in really inventive ways. So what will we be doing today? We're going to start by doing a short creative activity, which I'll ask you to upload to Padlet so we can all see and share our work together. Then I'm going to get your creative inspiration flowing by showing you art that I've made using waste. Then you'll get the chance to start to make your beautiful object for your house. I'll show you how to cut and weave milk bottles and fabric strips from leftover clothes to make your plant pots. And as you're making, you'll have the chance to hear from Yona Lesger, curator in fashion from the V&A Museum in London, to show you objects from the V&A Museum and her own work to inspire you. Then we'll hear from materials scientist Elena Diekmann, who will tell you and show you about some of the amazing innovative ways that she's found for waste materials to be used in new and useful ways. And finally, we'll have a sharing session so that together we can look at all the wonderful plant pots that you've made and think about what we might plant in them. So let's get started. Let's limber up our creative muscles and do a quick creative activity. So you're going to need a piece of paper and a pen or pencil. And I would like you to draw an object that comes to mind when you think of the word waste. So it might be an object of waste, a material. So no writing, just drawing, please. And once you've done your drawing, just take 1 minute to do it. Just the first thing that comes to your mind. Please, could you take a photo and upload your images to our online gallery, Padlet? So the link is in the chat. And Yona and Elena, just thinking about what do you think your idea of waste has changed through the work that you've done?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Difficult question to start with.
I think it has, because I think there are kind of so many different things in the collection. So things that were waste that I never imagined could be turned into something usable again. Like plastics such as this, like fruit skins, or even kind of end-of-line ribbons or fabrics that are not really used anymore and not produced in kind of a high enough quantity that normal kind of fashion brands would use it again.
That's fantastic. So your work has sort of influenced you. And what about you, Elena?
Oh, absolutely. Especially in a lab, you can investigate all the materials and see what amazing properties they actually have under the microscope. So it's definitely great to, look into the detail, what amazing things we actually throw away sometimes.
So while you're all thinking about what waste is, I thought I'd share with you some of the research that I've done about waste, because when you find out about the word waste, it actually comes from the Latin vastus, which connects us to the meaning of spaces that are empty or enormous. And sometimes I think it's really difficult for us to actually understand the sort of big consequences of how much waste we actually create and what we can do with it. So I'm an artist, and I really believe that art and science can help us think about and make waste in different ways. So while you're drawing your waste or your ideas of waste, I'd also like to hear from you. What do you think the problem is with waste? So please, can you write your answers to me in the live chat? And while you're typing your own ideas to share, some of the problems with waste that I've been thinking about are how objects are made with materials that don't decompose, such as plastics, and can cause problems for animals and the environment. And another problem is that we use energy and natural resources to make things. So things like trees are cut down and made into paper. So maybe Elena and Yona, any other problems with waste that you can think of? There are many while people are thinking about it.
I mean, there's just so many problems there. Often kind of waste gets burned, which is incredibly damaging, or it could stockpile, and waste from Western countries is often shipped to other countries, where it can then kind of, for example, disrupt like the fashion market or cause significant other issues there. There's so many problems.
Yes, and some problems sort of generate other ones. Elena, what about you? I mean, I know there's many problems with waste.
Yeah, I mean, one big issue that we create ourselves is we mix up the waste, domestic waste. It all gets put in one big bag, and then obviously it's too late. We can't do anything with it. So ideally, in the future, we learn how to separate them right at the start in our homes, obviously, and then we can utilize the materials for something else. But this is a big challenge in all countries, actually.
Yes, no, that's a brilliant point. And we've got some great answers. So Moy says that the effect it has on animals, especially sea animals, and that's, yes, absolutely. And actually plastics like this can really be found in the oceans. There's things like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is a kind of flowing island of waste. So that's fantastic answer. So while you're thinking more about waste, we're going to take Elena and Yona off screen now, because I'm going to get your inspiration going and show you some images of works that I've made using waste. So, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to guess the materials that I've been using. I just have to tell you, some of them are quite disgusting. So the first one here is from a series of work I made, cocaine. And if we can go to, I'll get you to focus on this one here. So can anybody guess, what is this made from? So this is a work that I did based on the way that the island of Mauritius, where my father's from, is being sort of consumed by tourism and being affected by waste. So can anybody guess what this is made from? Maybe while you're thinking about it, I'll give you a clue. It's made from food. So I don't think anybody's guessed yet. So I'll put you out of your misery and tell you what it's made from. It's actually made from meat. So it's a large structure that I made from dried meat, raw meat, and cooked meat. And then if we can go to the next image, this one here is actually made from butter and lard. So it's a frozen landscape made from butter and lard. So if you can go to the next work as well, can anybody guess what these are made from? So if I'll show a few of these images so that you can guess. So Moy says pasta. That's one that was about the last one for me. Yes, a lot of people think that as well, but actually it was more disgusting. It was actually meat. So this work here is, if we can go to the next one, is actually a ruined version of Paris that I made from waste food that I found on the pavements of Paris and collected and then carved into a miniature version of Paris. So if we go to the next one, you can see, and yet some of the other food stuff that I found on the pavements of Paris. So this is the next one is work, things that I found along the River Thames, and they were all made out of plastic. So if we go to the next slide, that's it. So you can see how much plastic actually gets thrown away. And then the final one, I'd love you to guess what this is made out of. This is a big installation that I made at the South Bank Centre. If we go to the next image, and can anybody guess what this is made out of? It's quite important to the workshop or the work that we're going to be making today. Maybe if we go to the next slide, you can see as well. So nobody's managed to guess. So I'll tell you that it's actually made out of 20,000 used plastic milk bottles. And in a way, that was a way of making visible the amount of waste that we actually create. And then the final work I'm going to show you is work that I made using weaving techniques with photography. So if we go to the next, and this was work that I made in New Zealand. And the next one, you can see I wove photographs together. And I made this work, which is called I'm the River and the River is Me, while working in New Zealand, where I learnt about what weaving means to Maori communities. And our creative activity today involves weaving. So let's take a moment to think about what weaving is. So I'd love to know what you think weaving is. If you can type into the live chat, that would be great. And Yona, if you can show us your loom, that would be fantastic.
Oh, so I've been working on this one for a little while. So not a milk bottle, but hopefully this one is quite interesting. So I did kind of quite a maybe nerdy thing, and I went in an exhibition at Tate of a textile design and did like the counting to make sure that I could recreate the patterns. So I've been working on this one.
That's absolutely stunning. And I'm sure some of you have tried weaving in different ways as well, but that's incredibly intricate. Thank you so much. That's incredible, Yona. So while you're thinking about what weaving means, I'll tell you what the dictionary definition of weaving is. It says that weaving is, as you saw from Yona's loom, it's interlacing threads or making something from interconnected parts. And I think that's a really good way of thinking about how we deal with waste and also what we're making today. So I learned as well that for Maoris, weaving is actually a sacred act. The weaver, the weaving, and the wearer of weaving are linked and are connected through ancestors and future generations in a kind of sacred history. So in Maori art, it's sacred, and the weaver is considered the medium. And Maori weavers are linked over time with their ancestors and with future generations, as I said. And when woven cloaks are sold, donated or acquired or taken by museums, normally there's a concern about their preservation. But for Maoris, it's the accessibility and the interaction with the weaving or the objects that kind of keep it alive. And I find that really exciting way of thinking about how we bring together different materials and also bring together different people for doing and making together. So now we're going to do our first weaving activity together. So what I'd like you to do is get your materials, and you're going to need your 2 plastic milk bottles. If you can make sure that there's no milk in them, that you've emptied them out, rinsed them out, and that they're nice and dry, that would be fantastic. And you'll need your scissors and also either your string or your cut up bits of material as well. So what I'd like you to do is, if you get your scissors, and you might need, be careful when you're cutting open, you might need an adult to do that, because what you're going to be doing is not cutting flat, but you're going to be cutting in about halfway through. And what you're doing is kind of making a pot shape through your cut. So I'll just do a little incision there, and you're going to cut that so that the top half of the bottle you're taking off and you're left with the bottom part. So what you're left with is this, and that's going to be your starting point for making your woven pot. Then what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take your pot and you're going to be cutting it into about 2 centimeter strips. So don't go all the way down because you need a kind of base for doing the weaving. So you're going to be cutting and leave about 1 centimeter of the bottom. And if you cut down all the way round and you're making 2 centimeter strips, and those are going to form a little bit like with Yona's loom. These are going to form your loom, but your loom's going to be a milk bottle. So, and don't worry if you don't get to finish it all now as we're doing it, because what we're going to do is allow you to carry on making that while we chat to Yona and Elena. But I'll just show you the rest of the steps so that you can be getting on with it. So you start cutting, and once you've finished, it should be like a kind of frondy milk bottle. And then what you're going to do is take your starting point for doing your weaving. So if you've got string, you can just tie a knot. The same if you're using bits of material. So tie a knot around your first one, and then as you weave, you go in and out through them so that you start your first weaving and go all the way round. And then all you do is you keep weaving that round. So they are a bit bendy, but that does allow you to get your string in. So as you do one line, you can continue and do the next one. And if you just make sure that as you're doing it, you kind of push your string down. It will feel quite loose at first, but the more that you do, you will be able to push down. I'll just do a bit here. So you can see that you're doing your second line as well. And as you're working, you just push them down. And then you continue that all the way around. And there might be points where you have to stop and make knots just to keep it going together. So it's a bit thicker when you're using the material strips, and it's a bit thinner. There'll be more times going round when you're using the bits of string as well. And I think Yona's doing some weaving as we're weaving as well, which is fantastic. So as you're doing that, I'd love to know, why do you think artists and designers, as well as scientists and engineers, are interested in waste materials? So you can carry on making. You've got your basis for your woven pot. So carry on doing your weaving around. But if I can hear from you about why you think artists and designers, as well as scientists and engineers, are interested in waste materials. So Elena and Yona, maybe you could tell us what interests you.
Oh, I just think that waste is one of the biggest problems that we have today. I mean, obviously the climate emergency is an emergency. It's really urgent now, and waste really contributes to the problems that we have. And so it's one of the best ways for designers, for scientists, and for makers to try to reduce some of that problem.
Yes, and Elena, what do you think?
I mean, especially for designers, waste has become a really interesting resource. And I think it's because designers are very good in improvising with different resources. And obviously there's a lot of waste. So it has become very, very trendy and useful for designers to make use of this underutilized resource and create new innovations out of it. And they can often move a bit faster than scientists. So as a scientist, it's very good to work with a designer because they produce an output.
And I think that word improvise is really important, because as you're making your things, you might improvise and think, actually, I want to use some of it string, I want to use some of it different bits of fabric, I want to do things differently. So do improvise. You might find your own way of doing something. So I think that improvisation is a really important creative act. And while you're doing, Susan, we've got a great response. Susan says they can make things with them. Yes, so new things can be made. I think that's a really fantastic point, that actually waste isn't just something that we throw away, it is something that we can use to make things from. So while you're doing your making, you're going to have the opportunity to hear more about waste from Yona Lesger, who's assistant curator in fashion at the V&A Museum. So Yona, it's fantastic to have you here. Maybe you could start telling us about the work you made as a student in costume design.
Absolutely. So I actually studied costume design first. So I did my foundation year in theatre costume in Antwerp, and then I did my undergraduate in costume design in Scotland, in Edinburgh. And so definitely using waste or old materials was a great way for me to help kind of make quite innovative things, as well as to save money, because obviously as a student, you don't have lots of money and we need so many different materials for it. So using kind of waste materials or secondhand things was incredibly useful and really kind of helped to shape my work. So one of the things that I created was a shirt dress. So don't look too much at the slightly embarrassing picture of me on the left. But so this is a dress that's completely made out of men's shirts in a place pattern that I just got from a secondhand kind of local shop there, and just started to create these kind of large strips to make a new kind of dress out of things that would otherwise be thrown away. On the right, you see a wig that I knitted out of videotape. So I went to lots of secondhand shops and just bought old videotapes that people don't use anymore. I took out the tape and then started knitting it. So this wig can actually be worn in several different ways, which is another way to try to reduce waste and to try to reduce kind of needs for more different costumes. So this one can be worn as the 1960s kind of hairstyle, as it is shown in this picture. It can be worn as a Rococo wig, so that's like an 18th century wig. That was some of the really, really tall ones that women used to wear at court. And then you can make it into like a judge's wig. So there are lots of different opportunities to use this one for. Then for my final year project, I designed for The Mummy, which was a Hammer horror film from the 1950s. And so especially for The Mummy, I used lots of waste cotton materials that were just left at the university and that weren't being used by other students. And I also used waste to dye the different fabrics. So I used I used tea, I used coffee, for example, and they give really lovely kind of different tones of browns for the costume, so that it creates kind of quite a natural look to the costume. Then for the costume on the right, that is a lady's costume from 1896, very specific, but I try to follow the fashion from that time. And for that, I actually bought original kind of broken jewelry from the 19th century that you can just buy on shops online. And so again, this jewelry wouldn't really have been used anymore. No one would have bought that or worn it. So I took that apart and then created the very kind of intricate floral pattern that you can see at the bottom of the dress there.
That's so wonderful work, and it'd be great to hear about your work also at the V&A, particularly in relation to the exhibition Fashioned from Nature. It'd be fantastic to hear about how waste was part of the pieces in the exhibition.
Yeah, absolutely. So Fashioned from Nature was on at the V&A from 2018 to 2019, and it's really tried to see how we can create a more sustainable fashion industry and what we can learn from the past. So it shows kind of quite the breadth of different objects that the V&A holds, including kind of clothing, accessories, and from 1600s until today. So historically, there was just less waste than we have today, because the fabrics that people would use were such high quality that you'd be able to use them over and over again. So either people would remodel the garments to kind of suit like the latest fashions, or they would even give them to servants. We have dresses in the collection that were remodeled according to the latest styles 100 years after the original dress was made. And they could still be worn and they were still in great condition. But the problem of waste really increased around the 1960s when you start to get kind of ready to wear fashion. So this is fashion that isn't made specifically for someone anymore. It's just made in kind of standard sizes. And so to make that as fast and cheap as possible, just less, the quality of the fabric especially was just starting to get less and less usable and less sturdy. So one of the biggest problems that we have now is that all of this quite cheap clothing just goes into landfill or gets burned. And so waste is definitely one of the biggest problems that the fashion industry has today. And so you can see that there's an increased interest from designers to really use that waste again for making new collections and new fashions, which is hopefully going to reduce the carbon footprint. And so many of the contemporary designers in the exhibition used waste, including, for example, end-of-line ribbons and fabrics that only came in quite small quantities. They used waste from previous collections that they'd made, or they used things like plastic, as you're using now, or waste from the food industry.
God, that's fascinating. And can you share with us some of the objects in the V&A collection that show different ways of dealing with, tackling, or using waste?
Absolutely. So one of the first examples that I have is a silk blouse. This one is from the Second World War. And so during the Second World War, it was very hard to get clothing and to get fabric. And this was all kind of very strictly limited by the government. And so there's this great story of a German pilot who crashed in the UK. And he saw this group of women with scissors and knives kind of run towards him, and he got really scared and he thought that they were going to kill him. But instead they ran straight for his parachute, which is made out of silk. So they had more fabrics to make new garments. So this particular blouse has actually been woven out of parachute silk. Then another example that we have in the collection is this chair. So this one was designed by Sahil and Sartak Design Company, who are based in Delhi in India. And they use the waste, waste cloth from Indian garment factories and workshops. So kind of during the cutting process, there's always kind of bits of waste fabric. And so they sort that fabric into a ball of rope. And this wool is often used by local people to make day beds, but they've also used it to make the seat of this chair. Then we've got the next suit, which is by Honest Buy, designed by Bruno Peters, who used to be the art director at Hugo Boss. And he knows that there's a problem that fashion designers don't often say kind of where their clothing is made or what their clothing is made from. And so that's been kind of the most important thing about this design. So every single factory and every single person and material that has been made or that's been used to make this suit has been woven into the fabric. So you can see the kind of white and black lettering at the top. And that means you know exactly where your clothing came from. Then the last example that I've got for you is this blouse and this skirt from citrus waste. And so these were designed in 2017 by Mario Trimarchi, who's an architect, and he designed this for Salvatore Ferragamo. And so this is made from the waste of the citrus juice industry in Italy. So during the kind of juice making process, you have these kind of quite rough fruit skins left. And so these fruit skins are used to extract cellulose, which is kind of like a paper-based material. And that's then kind of spun into yarn and then made into fabric. And so the great thing about this is that it reduces the waste of the food industry, but it also means that we don't need more resources and more materials to create new fashion.
Well, you know, that's so fascinating, amazing things that people have made. And really makes me think about I can use food waste in even more ways than I've been using already. So I'm sure you've got questions for Yona yourself. So please, can you type any questions you've got in the live chat? And while you're doing that, I'll just touch base with you again about your weaving. So just making sure that as you're listening and watching, you've also got your wonderful woven milk bottle. And just remember, as you're going around and doing your weaving, so this is with a fabric strip, don't worry about it being quite loose as it's going around. What you can do as you go all the way around is just kind of tuck it in and push it down. So let's go all the way around. I'll show you on here. So when you reach this point and you're going to go on the next line, just make sure that you've done the cut so that you're then going and actually doing weaving. So that it means the one in front, the next line goes behind, and then you continue your weaving round. So we'll just carry on doing another whole. And it does feel quite floppy, but as you're doing your weaving, it's actually going to get tighter. And some of you will be using string, and some of you will be using strips from leftover fabric as well. And there's a fantastic tradition of using leftover fabric. There's something called proggy mats, they're made in northeast Durham, and they're using Hessian sacks from the mining industry and also leftover clothes strips as well. So I'll let you carry on doing your weaving. And when you get the chance, we'd love to see how your weaving's going. So add photographs of your weaving so far to Padlet, our online gallery. And as you're carrying on doing your weaving, I'll be doing mine as well. We've got the chance to go to Elena Diekmann to hear about her amazing research on materials. So Elena is based at the Dyson School of Design Engineering at Imperial College London. So Elena, it's wonderful that you're joining us. I'd love to ask you about your work with waste. Could you describe some of the exciting projects you've worked on with waste? I know you've worked with feathers and also waste fabric.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Elena, and yeah, in the last years, I've worked with a lot of different waste materials. My focus is on textile waste and on keratin waste. A lot of you may know keratin, your nails, your hair. This is all from keratin, and my material expertise is chicken feathers. So they are all also made out of keratin. And during my PhD, which was 4 years long, I looked into all kinds of methods and ways you can maybe reuse feathers for different projects, materials, applications. And yeah, I've tried an awful lot with feathers. And yeah.
And what sort of thing? What kind of solutions did you come up with using feathers? I know you sort of went in some incredible things. So we've got a question from Gulen, and he says, "How did you make it? How did you make them?"
Yeah, so initially we tried to shred feathers up, and we made it into really fine powder. And then from this feather powder, we actually made things like toothbrushes even. But, you know, there's always the one side when you invent something, and then there's the other side of humans that need to use the stuff. So can you imagine to brush your teeth with feathers? I don't think many can. So instead, we actually made a textile from it. So we converted it into a bat. And you can use this textile for different purposes. You can insulate houses, you can insulate food deliveries, you can also make this into stronger panels, or you can make furniture out of it. So there are a lot of different use cases for this textile.
But that's so interesting, because you're also thinking about, it's not just coming up with the incredible sort of ways that it can be used, your scientific inventions, but also, as you say, real world use. Like, will it be used? Is this something that can be, like you're saying, with sort of chicken feathers and toothbrushes? Perhaps people won't go for that, but so I think that design process is so interesting. Do you want to tell us a bit more? We've got an image on the screen.
Yeah, sure. So what you see here is our first product. So over the 4 years, we also, explored the commercial potential. So is there anyone who would pay for this? Can we sell it? And what is the use going to be? And this is now Plumo. So we invented the world's first feather-based packaging. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of feathers available everywhere, all around the world, millions of tons actually, because we all love chicken. We eat it every day. In every religion, you eat poultry, and we have a lot of feathers available. And we developed this packaging material, and we are hoping to replace polystyrene. You maybe know polystyrene from receiving deliveries. It's this foamy, spongy stuff that's flying around everywhere. So it's not great. It's a heavy pollutant for the environment, and our material is fully biodegradable. It's derived from nature, and we are hoping that everything that feathers do for a bird, the feathers can also do for our goods, so for packaging, so protect them from impact and insulate them. The goods that you maybe receive in this. So this is our invention.
Elena, it's completely incredible. Yes, we've got Gulin says, I love it. It is absolutely, it's incredible to think like that. And I think you mentioned, we've got Susan saying, wow, as well. It is absolutely incredible creative and scientific thinking. And what do you're really working at the cutting edge of research. What do you think the future of how we deal with waste will be? I know it's a big question to ask.
Yeah, so I try to answer in a nutshell. So we have all kinds of different industries, and they produce a massive amount of waste. And this waste is generated locally and all around the world and in different industries. And I think the future will be that we start connecting waste streams that occur in one industry and offer it actually to another industry as a feedstock. So this is an example. We have the poultry abattoirs producing all those feathers, and they have actually no use for them. And we went now and used this waste stream, converted this, and offered it into the packaging market. So I think the future of the circular economy will be to make those connections. And I think designers and scientists are core to create this network of different entities reusing and recycling those waste materials.
Can you explain a bit more about the waste stream? What does that mean exactly? Because that's a new term to me as well.
Yeah, so in the context of feathers, it basically means we eat the chicken. So once they're processed, you have a different waste stream. So you have feathers, you have also parts of the bird that you won't eat. And usually industries are very good to find different uses for those if they're a failure to them. But if they have nothing to do with the material, and at the moment it's going to landfill in a lot of occasions, then they are not willing to invest anything into converting it into something more useful. So as a designer or as a scientist, you then take material samples and you analyze it and try to look in science and literature, what else could you do with this, what are good properties, and then you start back of the envelope analysis in a way to assess even what's feasible. And then it's in our case, we connected with a lot of different other industrial sectors and try to understand how they could utilize the material. So we went into the building sector and offered them a proposal, a building insulation made from feathers. We went into the automotive sector and offered them an automotive felting made out of feathers. And then you collect feedback, and it makes your proposal more robust. But also, it's really a trial and error process. So we also tried a lot of things that didn't work at all, as the toothbrushes, for example.
And what does it feel like? Because as an artist, you do that as well. You try things, you go down different paths, and sometimes you come to the end of that and you have to go back down a more fruitful one. But sometimes you find that things that you've thought about before start to come into your work, because hearing you speak, you realize what an incredibly creative process, and scientific and rigorous. So, I feel really quite in awe of what you do. So how do you does it feel like a journey through different paths, exploring different ways of working?
Absolutely. Like your learning curve is very high. So you start with a very naive view of the world, and in a way, and over the years, your thinking really develops, and you make those kind of connections, and how you can utilize the material. And obviously, connecting with experts and industries is really important to understand, how the material can come to life in the real world. So it's really important for scientists as well to connect with the real world and understand what a real world challenge is. I don't think if I would have not gone out, and worked with a lot of different factories, I would have never learned what is a really feasible, winning proposal. So it's maybe a bit of a opinion about scientists that we work only in the lab, but actually a lot of scientists work with the industry and go out in the real world and discover what the innovation does.
As you say, it's real world solutions. And I know you've done lots of amazing work with feathers, but you've also been using materials in different ways, or fabric. Maybe you can talk a bit about that, because your work, it's great to find out more.
Yeah, so during my PhD, I did not only use feathers, I explored also other natural fibers. So and we have actually a lot, at the moment we are relying a lot on non-renewable resources, synthetic materials, and actually there are a lot of natural fibers that can be used. So in the UK we have a flax, there's also hemp that can be used, there's linseed fiber. So we actually on our farms there's a lot of amazing fibers that can be used for textiles. And at the moment obviously everyone is talking about fast fashion. But the next stage is almost to replace cotton with more sustainable, locally grown fibers. And that will really revolutionize the way how, what we're going to wear almost. So it's going to be, I think, an interesting 10 years ahead for fashion and the waste industry.
And maybe I can ask you, and also I'm sure you've all got questions for Elena. Hearing about her work is incredible. So if you've got any questions, if you can put them in the live chat, and then we can ask her as well, that'd be fantastic. But maybe I can ask you, Elena, but also you, Yona, how has your work affected, particularly using your buying of clothes, or your has it been affected? I mean, I've always worn secondhand clothes anyway, but it's like, has your work influenced how you consume, or how you buy, or how you wear things?
Yes, absolutely, for me. So I made quite a lot of changes kind of during Fashion from Nature and afterwards. So I try to only buy from either kind of sustainable and ethical companies, or buy secondhand, which is of course great because you're reducing waste. I also became vegetarian during the process of the exhibition, because that's of course also part of kind of creating waste and needing resources. So it's had a huge effect on my day-to-day life.
And what about you, Elena? Has your work, has it changed the way you look upon chicken feathers?
So I'm definitely not eating so much meat anymore, because just working with food industry, you learn a lot, and how impactful this is to avoid meat. And I mean, before I was actually eating poultry and chicken sandwich every day, but if you see how much resources go into this process, you think twice. That's obviously one thing. But also we need to be realistic that, that the world is not going to become vegetarian from one day to another. So this is why we really need to think about some smart solutions, how we can deal with this mountain of waste there, while the world is switching to new dietary patterns. So I discuss actually a lot with vegetarian vegans that have sometimes an issue with the project, but usually they understand the project better once I explain to them this is an abundant waste material and we are reusing it for something more valuable.
Yes, I think that really goes back to what you're saying about real world sort of solutions, also checking what's actually possible. So we'd love to, I'm about 3/4 of the way through my weaving. We'd love to see how your weaving's going. Don't worry if it's not finished yet, and don't worry if you feel like it's not perfect. If you've got photographs of what you're doing that you can share on Padlet, that would be fantastic. So just a note, as you're doing your weaving, just make sure that you're pushing down what you've woven just to make it more secure. And if you're not able to finish everything in this session, don't worry, we've given you an idea of something that you can make in your own time. Might also take you might also come up with new materials that you can use as well. So please do add your photographs to Padlet. We've got Yona's doing her weaving as well. I'm sure Elena's doing something weaving with chicken feathers while we're speaking as well. We're all weaving in our own ways. And before we have a look at what you've made, I'd love to hear in the chat what your favorite thing about today's workshop has been, and what you might do differently. Has it made you think differently about waste? So if you can put that in the live chat, that would be fantastic. And the artist, I wanted to just share that the artist and designer William Morris, he said, have nothing in your house that you do not know is useful or believed to be beautiful. So today we've been making something that is beautiful and useful, but we've also added and reused or recycled. So we've been making work that not only will look lovely, but also has a direct sort of application as well. So if you can share your works on Padlet, that would be fantastic to see. So what we've done today is we've done a short activity, creative activity on waste of drawing. I've shown you some art that I've made using waste materials. I've then shown you how to make your own woven pot using milk bottles, which you can then add your own plant inside. So yours will look different. It depends what material you're using as well. Might take you a bit longer than this session to finish yours as well. And then we heard from Yona Lesger, curator in fashion at the V&A, and Elena Diekmann, a material scientist at Imperial. And it'd be fantastic to look at your work. But while you're finishing off and taking photographs and sharing on Padlet, maybe I can hear a bit more from you, Yona and Elena, about other fantastic examples of the use of waste that you've seen. So I've talked at my perspective from an artist, you as a fashion curator, and you as a material scientist. Are there any other examples of using waste or thinking about waste that you think we should all know about, that we should share?
I think quite simple things are already super helpful. So if you've got some clothing that you don't wear anymore, or organize a little party with your friends and do like a big kind of clothing swap. There are lots of otherwise charities that will take your old things, where you can also find the most amazing kind of new or things for your own wardrobe. God, what else do we have? I mean, there's so much really exciting work going on. This was one of the probably more experimental, but really exciting works that was in the exhibition, which was actually a dress that was grown from roots. And so she put a little template on the earth and then started growing, I think, things like grain that has kind of quite strong roots. And so they started to grow around the template that she's created. And so she was able to make that into a dress. And so the idea that you might be able to use the roots that are grown anyway for our food and make them into clothing, I think is super exciting.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. And Elena, what about you? Any thoughts that you've got about?
Yeah, I mean, especially in London, because it's a big city and it's producing a lot of waste. There are a lot of startups. It's almost like a grassroots revolution, I would say, in waste reuse. So there are some startups that are reusing fish waste or shell waste and make it into new plastics. There are startups that make seaweed packaging, not pla. For example, the little sachets you have with ketchup and mayonnaise, they make this fully biodegradable and water soluble. So there are a lot of new building insulation companies that use natural fibers in different contexts. They're just a lot of little startups that are reusing now local waste streams. Sometimes it's very difficult for them to reach economies of scale, because they're dealing with very small volumes. So that's often a challenge. But overall, it's really exciting to see what's happening there, and how a city can become part of the circular economy almost, and reuse all the resources it's producing, and reuse those.
And do you think London's quite an innovative city in that way?
Absolutely, because it's also so restricted in space. I mean, everything is very narrow here. So in the future, we will need to think very carefully and develop smart solutions how we can reuse waste. I mean, in April this year, there was also the news that a lot of countries are not accepting any wastes now anymore. So we will need to start dealing with our waste ourselves, how it's supposed to be actually, and find solutions here locally in the country. And I think this will come now for many countries. I mean, it's not sustainable to ship waste around the globe anymore. We need to find local solutions.
Yeah. I think as well as an artist, I've been really influenced by, there's a movement from the 1960s and 70s in Italy called arte povera, and it was using everyday materials. And I think I just became really struck as an artist by all you can see in the background, all the milk bottles that I collect as well, about this idea of what materials we use, about how we make things precious. But actually one of the things you can do as an artist is also show the kind of volume of particular materials that we consume. And when I was making the work in the South Bank Centre with the milk bottles, I was shocked at how quickly I could collect that quantity of milk bottles from people. And it became quite overwhelming. So I almost wanted in that work with all the milk bottles in the South Bank Centre, people to be sort of kind of to take stock or reflect on what the particular materials that are in our everyday lives. And then as an artist, I've also been trying to reuse materials from previous works. And we've got, there's some organizations that create things in a sort of circular economy for artists, so that when people do exhibitions and things are taken down, because there's quite a lot of waste in the art industry, then on an app you can find out where these waste materials are, and you can then gather them and use them yourself. So you can kind of do things in a circular way. So thinking about our circular way, I've got my woven plant pot is nearly finished. It'd be fantastic to see what some of you are making as well. So if you can share on Padlet, that would be fantastic. And just one last question for Elena and Yona as well. Were you always playing with waste things when you were children? Were you always making things out of, because I definitely was, so it's carried on into adulthood. What about you?
For me, I definitely was actually. I remember as an 11-year-old, I was collecting waste candles from the neighborhood, and I remelted them into new candles. I know that it's quite random, but yeah. So I think maybe it's certainly something I grew up with.
That's very inventive. That's fantastic. I love the idea of that. And Yona, what about you?
I mean, it's been kind of quite fashion focused, but I did learn to sew at quite a young age. My mom was quite a good seamstress, so she would help me. And so I would use like bits of kind of fabric scraps that were left from bigger projects and make like little clothing for my dolls and my Barbies and things.
So there you go. We've continued our childhood play activities, and that's why creative play is so important in childhood and adulthood, because it's where all these ideas can come from, where they can spark as well. So I think we've got a work to have a look at on Padlet. I think somebody's uploaded a work that they've been making, so it'd be fantastic to see. I'm still doing my making here. Oh, wow. That looks gorgeous colors. I think yours is, gosh, you put mine to shame. That the colors are absolutely gorgeous in this. So yes, you can take it from, you can use things like milk bottles. You can also use more see-through ones like plastic cups. And at first, that's absolutely fantastic. I love it. And at first it seems quite wobbly and wiggly, but actually as you do your weaving, the materials scraps or the strings start to make it more solid. That's absolutely fantastic. I love it. I love it. So any more images that you can put up as well, that's fantastic. And how did you find making the work? If you want to say something about in the chat, that would be fantastic as well. I'm just finishing off my woven one here. How are you getting on, Yona? How's your weaving going?
I'm now experimenting with adding some more blue, and I've got a different color of purple. So yes, I might go to a little bit more blue afterwards. I'm trying to pick up on all the lovely colors that are in the original thread that I used.
That's gorgeous. And yours looks like very patient work. Does it take a long time to do? And
a very long time. I go quite ambitious, and I added quite a lot of warp threads onto my loom. So
how many have you got there?
Oh, probably 50-ish.
My goodness. My goodness. And you need very good light to do it. Because what happens if
you need quite good light? And I've got I made instructions for myself so that I wouldn't lose track of my counting. So I need to constantly count and not lose track of the pattern that I'm making.
That's absolutely gorgeous. So I can't wait. I'm looking forward to see it. It might take a wee while to finish, but I can't wait to see it at the end of it as well. So you've all heard lots of different ways of doing weaving, and what you'll have at the end is, and what I've done here is I've made my pot with woven strips from leftover fabrics. I've also actually put my plant in a separate one, which what you can do is put holes in the bottom. So that means that when you water it, it keeps a bit of the liquid or the water at the bottom. And then I've popped it in as well. So I can't wait to see what your ones are like as well. It's fantastic to see the one that's been made, and you might want to make them in your own time as well. So thank you so much. Well done for making wonderful work and for listening to all our experts on waste. So I'm really excited to think about what you're going to grow in your pots once you've made them as well. So thank you so much for joining our workshop. A recording of it is going to be available here on YouTube in a few minutes if you want to re-watch it or share it with your friends. And we're posting a link in the chat to a quick survey where you can tell us what you thought about this event. We'd love it if you can take 5 minutes to tell us. And the Great Exhibition Road Festival is running in South Kensington and online every day until the 15th of October. It's a week of free events in person and online for all ages to celebrate our remarkable world and explore how we can protect its future against the threat of climate change. So visit the Great Exhibition Road Festival website, which will come up as a link in the chat. And thank you to Yona and Elena for joining me. And from all of us, goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.